Peace, this is Brandan B. Mike Odums. We're at Studio B in New Orleans, and this is Theorematic. I mean, I feel like was Albert Einstein? Somebody had a quote that says that, all children we all were creative, and then we just learn to grow out of it. And I think for me, I was blessed and fortunate that I was never, it was never encouraged for me to grow out of it. You know what I mean? Like, if anything, it was the opposite. Like, all my peers kind of encouraged me to keep doing it, because they would look at what I was drawing and be like, oh, you did that? That's so cool. You're going to be an artist. And so I didn't know what it meant to be an artist, but at an early age, it was like defined for me. It was like, and I was like, okay, I'm going to be an artist. So I started to take art classes because I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be, right? And eventually, I grew to love it, or to appreciate it for what it can do. I mean, so for me, I can truncate the story by saying, so all throughout high school, I took art serious because I felt like it was what I was supposed to do, because I did it well. And so I went to spaces where they taught me how to create. They taught me how to use color, composition, everything that a good artist in training or a good artist in general should know. But when I graduated high school, I was done with it. I was like, I went to college for filmmaking because I was like, I didn't understand where I fit in the whole dynamic of me using paint or pastels to speak. I didn't see myself in that. So I stopped and I went to filmmaking because I thought it was a better way of telling stories. The reason why I got back into it was because there was a series of projects in New Orleans that happened organically, where I was just in these spaces that were abandoned after Hurricane Katrina. And one, I started to notice graffiti in a different way because it became more political, because here it was, these abandoned Katrina damaged spaces, and all you saw was the decay, but then there was a splash of color. And so for me, it stood out as a potential to be revolutionary, to say something profound. And so I went into those spaces trying to duplicate what I saw as far as graffiti, but then realizing that I wasn't comfortable with using lettering. So I was like, wait a minute, I went to school for painting. I know how to do portraits. So that's when I started to use spray paint to do portraits. And it was really identifying people who I love, people in history, people who I looked up to. And throughout those projects, people started to pay attention. And what I noticed, or the questions I asked, was why were they paying attention? And from that, I started to understand the truth and the potential in creating art. And somewhere along the way of those 3 projects, this is the 3rd one, I understood my why and why I want to create and why I feel like it's important for me to create. And it's definitely about like the messaging, about like the truth of me speaking about who I am and who we are, and hoping that people, when they see these portraits or see these paintings, they see themselves reflected in a beautiful way, So that's the short version of it. A lot of my exploration in painting has a lot to do with time and permanence, and like, as a creator, you acknowledge that you're creating something that potentially can last after your life is over, And I remember a friend of mine had this comment in school. He was like, I know why we paint. We want to be immortal. We want our work to last forever. And that was like a lot of pressure for me, because I was like, I always question what I created in terms of like, did this deserve to last forever? Like, what about this deserves to last forever? And it used to make me mad nervous and give me anxiety when I created. So it was painting in these public spaces, in these abandoned spaces, that liberated me, because here it was a piece that even if I loved it so much, I couldn't keep it. I couldn't sell it. It took all those pressures of creating out the window. But then the commentary was the same. People were coming up to me like, yo, why are you wasting your time working on this? Well, you can't sell it. Nobody gonna know you did this in the middle of nowhere. And the response to that was that lesson that I learned about just appreciating that moment and what it means to be in that moment. And so that's where the name B came from Project B to Exhibit B to now Studio B. These are all temporary projects that won't last forever. And so it's kind of like this story of like, we experienced it, or those who did experience it, appreciating the fact that you experienced it, because it won't be here. 2 years from now, you're gonna be telling the story about, oh, I went to this space in New Orleans, but it won't be there no more, So that's where the B comes from. Initially, graffiti and illegal street art forced people to pay attention to spaces that were getting left out of the narrative. I think graffiti in a unintentional way, graffiti writers just trying to come up on spaces that they thought was cool, but it forced people to pay attention as to, look at this property, it's filled with all this graffiti, like why? At least that's what I hope people ask. And then when the street art came about, it was a little bit more intentional. So hopefully it made people think, like especially when I was creating, like why is there a portrait of Dr. King in this abandoned space? You know what I mean? Like what is being said truthfully? So I do think that there is a form of revitalization that is occurring. I think the challenge is like how to like see all the steps, because sometimes as an artist, we can be pawns in a way where we're not conscious of it. So the challenge is to be able to see 5 steps ahead, to say, okay, once I start painting in this space, or once I paint this mural in this abandoned, forgotten space, what's going to happen 5 moves from now when the value of that space then changes because people pay attention, and then those people who live next door, they're priced out. You know what I mean? So we see examples like that with Windward and all these other spaces. So I think for me, it's like a duality of like appreciating what street art and graffiti and murals have done in New Orleans, but also learning from these other spaces to make sure we keep it in check, that we don't allow it to go too crazy. Because, a friend of mine had a comment, which I shared in with that, like, he said, you call yourself an alchemist, and alchemists, they turn lead into gold. But the challenge with alchemy is that everybody loves gold. So you know what I mean? So once you perform that alchemy on something, then you got to start swatting off people. It's like, yeah, it's gold now, but you didn't want it before, but now I got to like protect it. So that's a little bit of what we're dealing with here in a way. And I don't know if it's like this in Detroit, but people get real tight. It's like locals feel a way about graffiti when it shows up, but then they feel even more away when they find out that these are majority white people that's not from this space. Then they feel like, wait, what? You know what I mean? Because it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, if I'm in my house and I throw some trash out my pocket on the floor, it's my house. If you come in and visit me and you start throwing trash out your pocket, I'm like, yo, calm down, you can't do that, you know what I mean? But he could be like, what is trash everywhere? It's my trash, So I think there's a little bit of that, and as far as like this ownership of that graffiti kind of plays a role with when you have people who aren't from that space. And they be like, you know what, I'm gonna write on this wall, now this is my space. Now it's like this Christopher Columbus, like, and we dealt with that a lot here. Even still, where we have these areas that majority Black, very poor, who have to deal with not only just the lack of investment of the city, but then deal with the fact that there's this plague of graffiti writers who are coming in at the expense of your property, having art fair, having art adventures, you know what I mean? So it's weird about, the way I feel about graffiti is really weird, because on some cases I can like project the understanding of like why it's important, but then on the other side I could be like a bit of a conservative and be like, nah, this can't, you know what I mean? So I'm in this weird space in between sometimes. For a long time prior to spray paint, I always wanted to work big. But I'm not so much that I'm lazy, but I got a short attention span. So in most cases, for me, working big meant that I had to spend a lot of time on something. But I had this inclination to want to work big. So I think spray paint initially and still, it provided me a way to work big, but to be able to execute it in a timely manner. You know what I mean? I could paint a huge mural and do it in a couple of days, you know what I mean? Which I understand that's a privilege, because with brushes, pretty much all the time, it takes a little bit more strokes, a little bit more layers to get the same effect. So for me, spray paint is always, and then I think there's also this taboo around spray paint that's a little bit dangerous, that people still respond to in a way. I walk people into this space and I'm like, yeah, this is my work, this is a solo show, and it's all done with spray paint. They're like, wait, what, spray paint? Oh, you did all this with spray paint? Because spray paint still feels like this fringe medium that's like, fine artists don't use spray paint, or anybody who takes themselves serious don't use spray, so I like that aspect of it too. But then I also like the fact that spray paint is always different. Like, it's hard to quote unquote master it, because every single can is a little bit different from the one before. So it forces you to kind of understand and develop a brand new relationship each time you pick up a can, because the amount of paint in it, the cap, the amount of clogging that's in the cap, all these things control how it's going to react to your wishes. And I kind of like that aspect too. It's like this constant process of taming a beast, if you will. That's probably a super dramatic way of talking about it. But every time you pick up a can, it's like you're about to go into battle with this medium and hopefully get it to do what you want it to do. So I really enjoy that process of spray paint. But I think because of that, I also enjoy as much being able to take a pen or ink or a paint marker, because it's the exact opposite experience. Is now I have all this control, and it's like an overload of control, and I like to be able to sketch small. So I like the duality of those two things. That's a good question that I love answering, especially to the students, because I think there is this perception that I remember that one of the early classes I had in high school, which I'm so grateful for my experience in high school, even though I can be critical of it. But I remember one time there was a teacher who put down, he asked the question, why do you want to be an artist? And I think there was like 2 students that wrote because they want to be rich and famous. And he was like, this is not the class where you need to go. And it was like this process of understanding that there is like this implied thought that as an artist, business is like the antithesis, whatever you call it, of it, because that's you're doing this because you're not a capitalist, you're not a business person, you're doing this because you have this pure desire to create and contribute to society or the beauty. So there is that, but I feel like we're doing ourselves a disservice when we don't understand the value that we bring, so I think that's what took me a while to understand and not feel guilty about, because you'll create something and then you feel guilty about putting a price on it that you feel it deserves. You're like, oh yeah, I created it, it means a lot to me, but I'll let you take it for blah, blah, blah. And you be like, and you're like, dang, that was worth way more than that, but you feel guilty about it. So it took me a while to get to a point where I'm like, you know what? I don't care if this don't sell. This is what it's worth, and that's what it's gonna be. So for me, what it means to not be a starving artist, I think there's a difference between sustainability and cupidity. So cupidity is like the love of money, the love of fame and richness and all this stuff. That's like, bling bling. That's like the American dream, like just working your butt off so you can one day get everything, get all the stuff. For what reason, I don't know. We just want all the stuff. That's stupidity. And then sustainability that say, okay, how can I survive in my comfort level? So how can I say, all I need is this, and this, and I'm good. How can I sustain that? You know what I mean? And so initially for me, it was like, if I can get to a space where as an artist, I can sustain myself, then I'm good. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not creating because I want to pull out in a Bentley. You know what I mean? If I can sustain myself, then I'm good. And with this project, with Studio B, this was the first project that we inserted that into the process. It was like, okay, the previous 2 projects were all free. They were open to the public because they were outdoors. This project was like, okay, we need to sustain this space. We need employees. It's a big space to run. So we charge admission. We have a gift shop where we sell items that are for sale, that are part of the show. And that was initially a hard decision to make because there were people who was upset about it. They was like, you're a public artist. This work should be available for everyone for free. And it's like, we have a free day. Like Wednesdays you come in, it's free to the public. If you come in after that, you got to pay the ticket price. And I wasn't afraid to do that because I was like, you know what? If you don't want to do it, people pay what they want to pay for. I'm cool. You could say I don't want to pay $10 to get into your space and we could still be friends. I'm like, all right, cool. I ain't tripping. That's what's up. But if you do, we cool. You know what I mean? So it's like, but it's not restricted to. So I think for me, that's when it started to click and when it started to make sense, when I was like, okay, how can I sustain myself? And how can I just create with that in mind? And I think that also allows you to treat opportunities differently because you're not thinking about everything as an opportunity to be rich. You're thinking about, is it something I really want to do? Is it something that amplifies my voice? Is it something that adds to what I'm trying to contribute to the society? And being okay with saying no to opportunities too. You know what I mean? When it's not, I remember somebody told me a while ago, they said don't believe in the whole you only got one shot thing, because it's not true. Like you got plenty shots throughout life, you know what I mean? And so I think especially Black folk, we treat everything from this like scarcity model where we see every opportunity as the last opportunity. So we just, regardless of what it is, we got to eat it up. It's like, man, I don't know. Let's just use a fictitious scenario. Like P. Diddy just called me. He wants me to do this painting. He only gonna give me $2, but if I don't do it, I'm not gonna do this again. It's like, I'm okay with telling P. Diddy, nah, I'm straight. No, I mean, thank you, but no thank you. I'm good. And I think as an artist, sometimes we gotta like embrace that side of it too, to say, you know what, I'm okay with saying no. I'm okay with turning down an opportunity because it's not the right one for me, you know? So I rambled a bit, but that's kind of the way I treat my space now in terms of where I am. You know, I'm grateful to be here in this space where I'm not like a quote unquote starving artist, but I'm also not pressed to be squeezing every dollar out of every opportunity because I just want to get more stuff. You know what I mean? So